All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Bench. Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And Pat, we got some things to talk about. Anything interesting happened over the last few days?
You do anything fun on Monday night or anything like that?
Nah.
Eventful for me.
I was in Houston. It was a little warm. There was some kind of basketball game going on, but I wasn't. No, UConn men's basketball is the 2023 national champions, and it doesn't even feel real to say, guys. If you're listening to this on audio, you won't be able to see this, obviously, but I was challenged before the tournament started by Ben, who works here at Heavy, to wear a different UConn shirt as long as we were in the tournament, and it feels great to be able to cap that off by wearing a national champion shirt that I picked up on my way out of the stadium. All I can say is, what a run, and this team... Look, I've seen a few UConn national championships. I've seen a few championship games, none in person up until this one, but... Pat, this team, I think, may get looked back on as maybe the most dominant of all the UConn championship teams, and at the very least, the most well put together. I mean, I start thinking about just the construction of this roster, right? And you've got Sonogo, who everything runs through him. Then you've got shooters all around him with Calcaterra and even Naheem Aline at the end of the year. Alex Caravan, obviously. And then Tristan Newton. Of all people, I have to say, in hindsight, and after that game especially, Tristan Newton was the major difference, I think, that took this team from being just very good to championship, because we needed that guy to hold it down at the point, be able to make shots too and keep defenses honest. He was one of our best three-point shooters down the stretch. And Tristan Newton, like, we're so used to these UConn championship teams in the past being led by their point guards. He did his best impression of, Baz Kemba. Obviously never had to take over a game because his team was built differently, but for him to do what he did and help this team finish it off, I'm in awe. What an absolutely wild run for the Huskies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go on Newton too, there was a lot of pressure on this guy. Like you said, UConn, especially in the last decade, Kemba Walker, Shabazz Napier, Ryan Boatwright, it's point guard. And he was Dan Hurley's big get in the transfer portal. And There were times in the year where people were saying that, they don't have a true point guard, and that's what's going to hold this team back. But, he's just silenced all the doubters. And, I mean, we've been seeing him for 4 years, way back when in the American days when he was at East Carolina as a true freshman. The kid just does a little bit of everything, and he didn't have to, he didn't have to be the guy that took over. And he fit perfectly into that role. Like you said, their ability to space the floor was like nothing I've ever seen. Sonogo's a guy that needs space. Andre Jackson's a guy that needs space. And every single person around them, maybe except Donovan Clingan, of course, too, could get that space for them. And it was just Dan Hurley masterclass all year long.
Just impossible to defend, and then defending incredibly well themselves. Again, when you follow a team so closely like you and I have all year, you see the downs, you see the lows, and you worry that those can come back and bite you, or at the very least, they may temper expectations because you know what this team can fall back to. But I feel like in hindsight now, UConn's lows were not all that low. Like, winning a super close game against a bad team like Georgetown's a bad look. Losing to St. John's at home is a bad look. But we look around the Big East and we see just pretty much quality teams top to bottom, and it really just strengthened them, I feel like, heading into the tournament. These other teams, a team like a Houston, probably would have ran into more speed bumps if they were in a conference like the Big East, but instead they didn't play a ranked team for 3 months, and look what happened to them. A team like Purdue, the Big Ten, as much as they have decent teams, they tend to do this thing where they choke in the tournament. I feel like just being in the Big East in itself helped UConn so much. And look, there's something to be said for... Did you ever see that weird little stat about like a ton of champions over the past several years have been top 10 in the Week 6 AP poll? Have you ever seen that?
No, that's incredibly specific.
Yeah, it's a long-running thing. I don't know exactly how many champions it is, but like that's the week specifically that people point to. And looking back now, it makes sense because that is before conference play. It's before you run into, teams that know you well and you have to kind of grind it out against them. But that's a time where you're facing good teams on neutral courts. UConn, when they did that early in the season, That's what they were doing. That's when they were steamrolling, and that's when they got up to number 2 in the country. You get back into the NCAA tournament, that's what you're doing again. You're playing good teams on neutral courts, and UConn just showed that, what we saw early in the season was who they were. And running into some good teams in the Big East was just what made it scary for a little bit. But, I guess maybe we put too much stock into that and got a little too worried. This team hit their stride at the perfect time. There's multiple NBAers on this team, and just the makeup of this team was insane. I want to talk first. My personal experience just at the game was wild. The seats I had, I was lucky enough to just be surrounded by UConn royalty, and it felt unreal. Like, I'm looking around. Kemba Walker is literally 2 feet in front of me, and then I look to my right, and there's just Rudy Gay, Ray Allen, Emeka Okafor, Charlie Villanueva. I mean, guys who were or Jeremy Lamb was there. Like, guys who were not necessarily even big names in UConn history. It was just they all came along with the big names and made just a giant UConn reunion. It was so cool to see. It felt like a second coronation for a team that, since 1999 has proven themselves, but kind of had to prove themselves again after the stretch that we went through since 2014. It was amazing seeing all those guys so hyped. And then, of course, unfortunately, I wasn't the biggest TikTok star there. Dixie D'Amelio was also there, literally 2 seats next to me, which I thought was funny. I had one of those moments, like, while I was, after I got home, like, oh, a video I should have done. I don't like bothering celebrities in general in person, but after the fact, I was like, man, it would have been really funny if I made a video like, we got all these great UConn athletes from the past here, but at least I'm the biggest TikTok star. Pan to her, be like, shit. But look, I may see her again. Look, the D'Amelio family, for those that don't know, are all from Connecticut. Mark is like one of the biggest supporters of the team, Mark being Charlie and Dixie's dad. So for anybody confused as to why the D'Amelios were at a UConn title game, that's why. So hopefully, we'll be able to run into people like that again. Bill Murray was there, as he always was. But yeah, just an amazing game. Well worth the quick turnaround I had coming from LA from WrestleMania. I think I slept 2.5 hours the night before, but look, I slept about 13 hours yesterday, and we are back at it. So we are back at the podcast game. So Pat, I want to look ahead to next year a little bit. UConn is already the betting favorite to win the title again, but obviously, I mean, that's kind of just the uncreative thing that people tend to do after a team wins a title. They're like, oh, cool, now they're the favorite to win next year. What a surprise. But what I'm curious to see, and it's not really worth making a prediction right now because we just don't know what these guys are thinking, but as far as who can return next year, from this UConn championship team, only one player is fully out of eligibility, and that is graduate Joey Calcaterra, who I will miss greatly. His dagger threes that he seemed to hit for basically all season outside of the month of January were amazing. I'll remember him forever, but he's the only one that's out of eligibility. At the same time, UConn has 5 freshmen coming in, at least 3 of whom are expected to get solid playing time next year. So this roster is going to look a lot different next year. I'm very curious to see what happens to the likes of Tristan Newton, Naheem Aline, who were both honored on senior day but do have a year left, and just kind of the turnover that this roster is going to have. It's going to be a very different looking UConn team no matter how you cut it next year.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, looking through the whole roster, they need to create 5 scholarships and most likely 3 rotation spots. And, looking at this group of 13 scholarship guys, not going to say it's all going to happen, but I could see any 11 of them possibly not being there. The only 2 guys that I truly believe 100% will be on this team next year are Alex Caravan and Donovan Kling, and they're 2 star freshmen. Because, like you said, you look at Newton and Aline, they've got a COVID year. They've played 4 years of basketball. Maybe they want to move on with their lives, or maybe Hurley knew that this was a 1-year deal and that, they'll move on. They honored Richie Springs on
our boy. I'm so glad he got a ring, man. I'm so glad.
After 3 years of everything, this is the year Richie Springs finally gets some minutes. I give that kid some credit. Anytime they honor someone on senior day who is not a senior, they're gone. So, glad he got that championship. Hope you can go. Maybe stay in Connecticut, Richie. Go to New Britain. Go to Central Connecticut.
Right.
They love you there. He's too good for that, but so that should free one up. And then you look at, I think Andre Jackson will be back. He's definitely a guy who's going to play in the league, but he's made it seem like, I'm here off for 4 years.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so the fact that he really needs to develop his jump shot more. I still think he's going to make the league regardless of his jump shot.
Yeah, because, definitely.
Being 6'7", and the guy can guard anyone on the floor, and he's such a good passer. This whole team, which is incredible passers, but especially him. And it was so big that he could basically be the backup point guard. You could have a really strong offensive lineup out there with Jackson running the point as opposed to a guy like Newton or Aline or Hassan Diarra. And even like Diarra, he's a guy that his brother's an assistant coach, former UConn Mamadou.
Yep.
Maybe he'll be content with just sort of, kind of playing a reserve role. Or
right.
Again, you don't know. We don't know these kids. And the same thing with Samson Johnson, a guy who top 100 recruit 2 years ago, starts at the 4-game one, breaks his foot, and then he's an afterthought.
Right.
Again, we don't know. Is he going to try and move on? But you look at it again, they don't have a lot of bigs coming in next year. So there's a realistic chance that Samson Johnson could slot right back into that rotation.
Yeah.
And no matter what Jordan Hawkins says about we're coming for 6 next year, I would be stunned if he is back next year. The kid might be a lottery pick.
If Jordan Hawkins returns next year, the entire country is going to be on notice, because if this team returns its almost entire starting lineup, save for Tristan Newton, who I feel like Newton will probably go somewhere just because he knows Stephon Castle's coming in, and that's probably was the plan from the beginning. But if the starting lineup next year is Castle, Jackson, Caravan, Hawkins, and Sonogo, the country's going to be angry. So no, I think Hawkins is probably on his way out. I want to see the kid go to the league. I think massive potential for him. I was talking to a few friends about him the other day, and it's like, one of them said, I don't want to see him end up like James Bouknight, and I'm like, his shooting is too elite for that to happen. Jordan Hawkins in the NBA, his floor is Duncan Robinson, and his ceiling is Klay Thompson. Like that's where he's at. So he's going to be a rotation player no matter what he does.
I've heard the same comparisons to Bouknight, and you look at the difference is that Hawkins is a much better defender. He's a much better playmaker.
Yeah.
And it seems a lot of Bouknight's problems have been more off-court things, not getting along with coaches, just not gelling. Right. It's been disappointing to see that, but I don't think you can compare those two. Hawkins is just such a good athlete, and he's just such a good shooter, and he can create off the dribble. I can't see a situation where he ends up like Bouknight.
No, I would agree. But look, overall, I'm so excited to be sitting here and talking about a 5th national championship for UConn. Just a few weeks ago, this was one of the teams that was talked about as a dark horse. The little Ken Pom rules and stuff said we had a chance. And so, it's not a complete shock. But for us, for this to come to fruition after just what we've seen for the last decade or so is wild. And I don't think you can really argue that this is a blue blood program anymore, and I'm excited more about that than anything. That this is not like it's not like a tier 1 and then a tier 2 that has only us in it, historically speaking, and then everybody else. We're up in that tier 1, whether North Carolina or Duke or Kansas fans like it or not. It's where we are.
To do it 3 times in 24 years with 3 successive head coaches is incredible. It is truly, truly incredible, and credit goes to all those guys throughout this time, throughout the last decade too, of the dark ages to get back here. The one more thing I want to mention with UConn, I feel like this is sort of the elephant in the room, or the Adama Sanogo in the room, is like where he ends up next year.
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at it from the perspective of he's got another year, probably not going to make it in the league in general. The days of the undersized big who's going to play his heart out and be really physical is over. To be a 5 in the NBA, you either need to have elite height and be a great rim protector, or you need to be able to stretch the floor and shoot. And unfortunately, he just doesn't have either of those. Fantastic player. I mean, you look at Oscar Tshiebwe, who's probably the best player in the country, and he's going to come back again, presumably, because he's just not going to cut it in the league. So that's all well and good if Sanogo decides to stay. Is there room for him on this team next year? Specifically looking at it from the perspective that him and Donovan Clingan both need the floor space that each other cannot provide. It was so rare that the two of them were on the court at all this year because it didn't work from a spacing standpoint, especially with how much they emphasize spacing. Donovan Clingan's their guy. Scouts have said that whenever this guy's ready for the league, he's going to the league. Connecticut grown kid. If he's their future, could we realistically see Adama Sanogo at another school next year?
Oh man, don't even say that. No, it's a valid question. I've been reading similar things about Clingan, as much potential as he's shown, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to be a 15-minute a game player again next year. And that's not in his best interest. So it almost seems like one of them has to go, or there needs to be a different sort of rotation, or you figure out how to make them both work in the same lineup. Sonogo can step out and shoot when he is wide open, but here's the problem is that a lot of the time Sonogo stepping out to do that is to open up for, later in the shot clock for him to go back to the paint, which is where Klingon can't be anywhere but down there. So whoever's guarding Klingon will help off of him completely and leave him open at the 3-point line if he wants to try and space that way. And then Sonogo's going to be dealing with 2 guys on him all game. That's something that we managed to avoid this year because of all the shooters surrounding him. So it's a valid question.
And they'd have to make one of those guys someone they're not, like almost like what the Thunder did with Domantas Sabonis in the early career. Like they tried to make him into a shooter to spread the floor for Russ, and it just didn't work. And now we've seen what kind of player he can be. I would hate to see them try and stagnate Donovan Klingon just for the sake of accommodating Sonogo. And especially you look at they've got a 7-foot freshman coming in, and obviously a lot of these freshmen are really rough and rugged and raw, and it takes time to develop. And like we said, they've got Samson Johnson who could step into that. If I had to guess right now where Adama Sonogo is next year, I'm guessing he's playing college basketball somewhere else. As sad as that, as much as I hate that, if I had to put money down on it right now, I would say he's playing at another school next year.
Oh, man. I hope not. I feel like Sonogo, I find it hard to believe that UConn would push him out no matter what the other interests are. I feel like there's a lot of things that can happen here. Look, it's not completely out of the question that Donovan Klingon goes to the draft. Obviously, he has a lot to develop from a footwork standpoint, from an offensive scoring standpoint, but that is something he could theoretically develop in the league. He's already getting, comparisons defensively to a guy like Walker Kessler, and we've seen defensively every time this dude was in the game, like you were not getting to the paint. It was really a sight to see. So look, I have no idea. It's definitely a weird situation. I do think that another season of Klingon in the teens for minutes is dicey and not the best for his development. And I don't feel like Klingon is the type of guy to transfer given his connection to the state of Connecticut as a whole. So it's gonna be crazy. But at the same time, Sonogo transferring just seems like a alternate universe type of thing. So
and Jeff Goodman, take this with a grain of salt. However reliable we want to have Jeff Goodman as, he said that that the transfer portal hasn't hit its full steam yet, and he said it could even be someone on the court on Monday night that could join the transfer portal, and that just makes me think like, I hope it's not Sonogo, but just from a logistical standpoint, I just don't know how it's going to work, and I hate it because what a great guy he is, and just such a likable guy. This whole team was just so there was nothing.
Incredible personalities.
Group of guys,
I know.
It's such a fun group, and it's almost like I want time to, because I just want this to unravel. I need a few weeks to go by. I need to see the steps being put together for next year.
Yeah, hopefully these guys can all return and we can make it work somehow, because look, these guys have endeared themselves to UConn fans' hearts for literally forever. Like, we will not forget this roster. You win a championship, that's your reward, is that you go down in history. You're going to be on the pictures. You're going to be some of these guys will have their pictures put up in the practice facility in stores when they get drafted. So, it's an exciting time for Connecticut, and look, basketball capital of the world, back on the mat, baby. So let's go. We got some thoughts about the rest of the NCAA tournament as well. Look, I want to give a shout out to San Diego State. They did make me very nervous at a point in that game when they cut it to 5 and they just kept ripping the ball away from UConn. I was getting quite nervous because that was the biggest probably second half scare that UConn's had all tournament long. The rest of the any sort of stress we had was basically first half against Iona and first half against St. Mary's. Other than that, UConn was pretty much in control all tournament. And so for San Diego State to get to this stage and make a game of it, despite what the final score says, I think UConn won by like 17. But it was still a great fight for a team that stuck to their identity of being just a defensive menace. And look, this tournament as a whole was amazing. I want to give a shout out here to our Benchwarmer bracket pool winners. So we've got, I said the top 10 would win heavy.com gift cards, and we actually do have, no tiebreakers needed. So we will get some merch out there as well with podcast logos if you guys want to rep that. But here's our top 10. We got Michael J17, Sal, Kyle Berry, UConn, Actually Trying, Shutwell, Deck Gang, M Tromelin 18, basketball bracket, Schwammy, and Oral Robber. So you guys are the top 10. Only one of the top 10 did not have UConn as their national champion. So, and it was number 10, and that's only because there was not another bracket in the pool that had UConn as a champion.
What happened to the other guy whose name was like UConn sucks? I thought he was.
Oh, the guy with Kansas as his champion. Yeah, that's a tough scene. Let's see where he ended up if I can find him. Oh, may have to go next page. I will probably be here all day if I try to look for this. So I'm not going to. I finished 69th, nice overall. But look, that's out of 219. And given how ridiculous this year was, I'll take it.
50% is a win for me in a situation like that.
Yeah, having UConn in my Final Four at least helped, I think. The bracket overall, my bracket actually finished 76th percentile. I'm not upset with that given just absolute chaos this tournament. All right.
9 in weeks.
No, I don't blame you. Neither have I. That's why I'm surprised at this percentage because I have not kept up with it. Outside of the men's tournament, we've got the women's tournament that came to a close in interesting fashion. The Final Four took on a life of its own. I was loving watching Caitlin Clark throughout this tournament, and then for her to upset South Carolina, first of all, loved that because I'm just an active South Carolina hater. I did not want them to have an undefeated season. No real dislike to the program, but just as a UConn guy, you don't want to see these top programs get too much to their head, and I was worried that would happen with an undefeated championship season for South Carolina. But Caitlin Clark going crazy, dropping 40 points like it's nothing every other night. Then we get to the championship. Pat, what were your thoughts on the championship game? And we could talk about two or more things here, but there was the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese beef, and then also the officiating of this game was a major headline.
And that's unfortunate because both of those storylines have taken away from what was such a great tournament and such a great final game. Obviously, again, the score didn't indicate it, but the way LSU went out there and basically dominated the team with the best player in the country that just took down the juggernaut was so impressive, especially with Angel Reese in foul trouble for that whole second quarter. Thank you again to the officials who just swallow the whistle, man. No one's there to watch you. No one is there to watch you. Like, I thought the UConn game was excellently officiated. They let them play. There was nothing. There was no calls where I was really like, what? And then the tech on Caitlin Clark. My God. Just officials absolutely making it about themselves, and that just helps nobody. It's a bummer way to end the season for them because I think Caitlin Clark's run to the championship got more eyes on the sport, and then it's like as soon as you get eyes on the sport, you drown it out like that, and it was unfortunate to see. But look, overall, this tournament I think was amazing for women's college basketball. Women's college basketball is one sport that I just wish could get a little more steam and a little more respect because, maybe it's because I grew up watching UConn and went to UConn while the women were, in the midst of a couple of championship runs and putting together Final Four runs every year. But guys, these girls can play. Like, I understand if you want to tune in and just see ridiculously fast play and dunks and big, strong dude. But, like, if you are truly a fan of just the game of basketball and the technical aspects of it and appreciate good ball movement, great shooters, great playmaker, like, they have all of that. Just because most of them can't dunk does not take away from the quality of the sport. And I think Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese both proved that. And guess what? The best part about it, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese will both be back next season. So they're going to be able to bring people into the sport who remember these girls' names. They are not eligible for the WNBA draft yet. WNBA draft has a rule where you have to be at least turning 22 in the year that you are trying to enter the draft. Neither Clark nor Reese will have that happen. And let me just say the 2024 next year's WNBA draft is going to be loaded because it's got those two. It's got Paige Beckers, Haley Van Lith from Stanford. There's a litany of names there that are going to and like you said,
enhance
Paige Beckers coming back is going to throw her hat right into the best player in the country conversation. And like you said, just like the way that college is different from the NBA, there's a difference between women's basketball and men's basketball, but you just have to look at it for what it is. And what it is just these hyper talented, hyper competitive girls who are out there. Just it's so much fun, and the fact that it's now on the fact that it's on ABC, the championship, the most watched championship game ever, is just great for the sport. Especially seeing the men's tournament had the least watched final in the history of the sport. So it's definitely trending in the right direction, but I would love for it to catch that steam. And then, just to touch on a little bit of the beef, quote unquote beef. The fact that we're talking about this is ridiculous. You even have to bring this up is ridiculous because the people who had a problem with this are worthless. The Dave Portnoys, the Keith Olbermans. No one cares what they have to say at all. But obviously, you have to come to their defense. And it was great to see Caitlin Clark go on ESPN and come to Angel Reese's defense. Yeah. This was just a ridiculous thing. Let them talk trash. Let them be in the heat of the moment, be competitive. It's just a stupid conversation started by stupid people.
Yeah, and so many people that just don't care about women's basketball otherwise, too. It's like your first time talking about this sport all season is because you're angry about some sort of sportsmanship thing that just means absolutely nothing. It's a big nothing burger, 1,000%, and I think overall, it'll hopefully just do more good for the sport than anything. You see these girls have personalities. They are competitive. They want to win. And there's stars all around the women's game, and I hope people realize that. So, look, congratulations to LSU. Despite the officiating, it's hard to say that they didn't still deserve the championship. They won convincingly, dropped 102 points, I think it was, which ridiculous for any level of basketball these days. So good for them. And yeah, congrats to LSU. The only thing I would say is it's unfortunate Kim Mulkey had to win a title, but whatever. We don't have to talk about her. She's just not the best, but the players, congrats to the players. All right, another sport that we've got, Pat. Since the last time we spoke, this sport tipped off, wrong sport. Analogy there, but MLB opening week occurred, so we've got baseball fully underway. We'll probably be talking about that a little more over the next few weeks. But Pat, what were your first impressions from opening week? I was in stupid LA, so I couldn't really follow baseball all that much. I'm getting notifications from my Yankees and my fantasy team, and I know the Rays are 6-0. But outside from that, for somebody who was watching a little bit closer over the past week, what are your takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway from the first week is just pitching. These teams that everyone thought would be very good are not because of their pitching. Like, you look at the three worst ERAs in the league. It's the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and the Phillies. Three teams who have at least some talent. I mean, the Red Sox don't have that much, showing a bit of bias again. But the Phillies, you can put all these hitters you want in that lineup, but you can't fix pitching like that. And then the Blue Jays have been so disappointing. Kevin Gausman getting lit up. Was it Gausman? I don't even know. Don't take my word for it there. But somebody got lit up bad, and Manoah did too. But then you look at the Rays, who come out there and just pull these guys out of nowhere, like Shane McClanahan and Jeff Springs and Drew Rasmussen. A couple of these guys were outcasts, and the fact that they honed them to their system. And it works. And then you look at the Brewers, Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta.
Willie Peralta, the legend.
Peralta. He's still, I think he's in the national system. Shout out Willie Peralta.
Oh my God.
Did not expect him to come up today. But you see it, and then the Astros with Framber Valdez and Christian Javier. These are these teams that don't go out there and make these huge splashes. In free agency or trades. These are teams that build guys up from within, find the scrap heap from the other team. Runs are crazy. I think it was Sunday where it was like the overs were 13-2. Like, if you bet all the overs, so teams are going to hit. So it's like, you need to pitch. Pitch so far. And shout out Sandy Alcantara, stud. Complete game shutout last night. An incredibly old-fashioned guy who could go the whole distance and yet still be an analytics darling. Shout out Sandy.
Absolutely. And look, just from a Yankees perspective, I'm very excited Anthony Volpe got named starting shortstop. I just want to give a shout out to him. Also dominating for my fantasy team in the stolen base category. The guy just robs one every time he's on. But overall, Pat, I think my takeaway from the first week, from somebody who wasn't watching the games closely but just kind of following things, it seems like the pitch clock and the new rules and such are mostly a good thing. I mean, they've taken down the game's total time, which was their end goal all along, and it's helping a lot. We had a game, I believe it was Sandy Alcantara's start, that went, I believe, an hour and 57 minutes. That's unheard of for a baseball game that's not, the classic 7-inning game that we've gotten used to sometimes. So wild for a 9-inning game to be under 2 hours. And I think people are going to get frustrated seeing pitch clock violations and strikeouts on it. We had Manny Machado getting ejected because of it the other day. There's going to be growing pains, but all I can say is it's for the best going forward. Players will get used to it. There's no reason to be Nomar Garcia parring, Velcro every 5 seconds in between at-bats and just taking so much time. It's going to be better for the game overall, and I promise these players will get used to it. It's going to be awkward for now, but it'll be all right.
Absolutely. I've always, as soon as this became like an option, like as soon as as soon as they introduced this in the minors, I was always been a proponent of this
Mm.
because if you can make this game faster and more presentable to fans without affecting the integrity of the game, you've got to do it. And it
Yeah.
still feels like the same game. Like you're not watching this and being like, oh, this pitch clock is ruining my enjoyment. Like you said, who wants to see, especially guys strike out, but they'll get used to it just like the minor leaguers did. But
Yeah.
overall, I think that it is just such a good thing, and I love, I was not a fan of banning the shift because that is the integrity of the game. Like teams found a strategy to get an advantage, they should be allowed to do that. I'm not a fan of that, but that said, singles are up, batting average is up, runs are up. Fine, though I'm not a fan of the rule itself, what's come of it has been good. And the stolen bases have been awesome as well. From the lack of pickoffs and I think the Orioles are going to steal like 1,000 bases this year.
Yeah.
Like it's just in a league where no one runs anymore. We're going to start seeing guys running again, and that's going to put a lot more emphasis on the catchers too. Like I said, I don't like the shift rule, but I like the execution of everything so far. I'm liking what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's added a lot more action to the game and in a lot shorter of a time, which is exactly what I think we need at this point. Baseball has kind of struggled with, lower attention spans, which is a human thing, but also an issue you have to adapt to, and I think they're doing their best. I'm excited now that college basketball is over, to sit down and watch some baseball here over the next few weeks and really delve into kind of the new rules and the new feel of the game and just how much quicker of a pace it is. So, no, I think definitely a good thing overall, and I'm excited to see where it goes going forward. Also, one thing I was looking at baseball stats just to kind of brush up. How's Brian Reynolds leading the league in home runs with 4? I was just like browsing the stats, and I'm like, why? What? That is the weirdest person to see.
He hit 2 at Fenway on Monday.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. You got to stack them up in one game because I'm like, this guy's not a home run hitter, and I was so confused. I figured I'd see some usual suspects. Granted, it is early in the year, so you're going to get guys that have hot starts and then tail off, but still just very odd to see.
Another Brian Anderson,
just
by the Marlins, and
just
passion, which is the most Marlins thing ever to get
right
by such a mediocre franchise. Then he's just raking,
just batting over 500, I believe.
A team that I expected to be very good, and I still don't expect them to be very good in the long run, but hey. Good on them.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be talking about more baseball here in the weeks to come as the season kind of settles in. But we also are obligated here on Off the Bench to talk about any major NFL news that happens. By the way, just want to advertise this real quick. We will have an NFL draft show coming up for the NFL draft. We're planning to do probably just the first round, but it'll be for the duration of the first round. And you guys can tune in, be it on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, wherever it ends up being. Just keep it locked, and we will keep you guys posted. But I think streaming during the draft will be a good time to be able to react to these picks in real time and discuss them. And, especially with a lot of these potential transactions and trades that are kind of hinging on the draft and that the draft may affect, whether it changes anything with Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers or, any of these other guys, it'll be interesting to see. So stay tuned for that. But as far as the headlines go, the Patriots were reportedly, allegedly, maybe shopping Mac Jones. So this came from Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, which honestly, large grain of salt in itself for that to be the case. But supposedly, Bill Belichick has shopped Mac Jones to multiple teams throughout the offseason, those teams being the Raiders, the Texans, the Bucs, and the Commanders. However, you've got multiple sources now coming out and saying that that's probably not the case. Andrew Callahan, who is a Patriots beat reporter for, I believe it's the Boston Herald, said, checking with league sources today, I found no belief the Patriots will trade Mac Jones. One team source called the shopped report nonsense, and it struck others around the league as likely old news overstated. Jones was in the building and has been regularly. And then we've also got Mark Daniels from Mass Live saying the same thing, saying one NFL source said they hadn't heard anything about this, adding, that's news to me. Second source said the Patriots haven't contacted the Buccaneers about Jones, saying that his name has never come up. And a third source said the Patriots have not contacted the Raiders about a trade involving Jones either. And to me, the fact about Callahan saying that it's old news overstated makes a lot of sense when you bring the Raiders into this conversation, because there is no reason for them to sign Jimmy Garoppolo and then trade for Mac Jones. That is, at this point, 2 of the same guy. One of them's just younger. You're not going to pay Jimmy that much money to be a backup just because Mac Jones would probably be the starter in that case. You're not going to do that. So it does make sense that, Josh McDaniels with his obsession over former Patriots, that maybe he would go after Mac Jones, but then he kind of pivoted because it fell through. To me, Pat, I I'm not taking this as being anything new, the Patriots shopping Mac Jones, but it is a little bit of where there's smoke, there's fire. It's obvious to me at this point that Mac Jones is not entrenched as a starter for the next few years. It's obvious that he's not their definite guy that they're going to give, a couple years of leeway to. It just seems like maybe this year is kind of do or die for Mac. I mean, they may look at it like, hey, we got you a real offensive coordinator. Not that you should have ever been without one, but we got you a real offensive coordinator. We got you a couple of weapons here with Juju and Mike Gesicki added to the mix. The offensive weapons are not A1, but they're not bad. And so it just seems to me like I fully expect Mac Jones to be the starter for the Patriots this upcoming season. But beyond that, I think it gets murky.
Yeah, I think we're still understating just how bad that offense was under Matt Patricia last season, because we saw good things from Mac Jones 2 years ago in a Josh McDaniels offense. And that was why at the beginning of the offseason, I thought Mac Jones would have been one of the more palatable fits for the Raiders. I've said a couple weeks ago that Bill O'Brien's shown he's a good offensive coordinator, good offensive coach. I don't expect necessarily Mac Jones to be some kind of stud, but I think he will turn around considerably and, maybe put out a little of this smoke going on. But it always seems like there's some kind of drama coming out of New England in the post-Tom. Well, even at the end of the Tom Brady era and then the post-Tom Brady era. So I do think that there's smoke and there's fire here, and this is probably something that won't go away, but he'll be the starter in the Patriots next year, and then maybe we'll have this conversation next year with a bit more basis to it.
Yeah, if there is a Bailey Zappi contingency out there that wants him to be the starter for the Patriots, I need you guys to relax. Bailey Zappi is not better than Mac Jones. It's just kind of another Mac Jones that went to a different school. Like, I feel like sometimes people fall into this, he's new, so he must be better. Like, whatever we have right now is not working. It's as hard as it is, we really just have to wipe this past season under the rug, and let's see what we can do now with better weapons on offense, an offensive coordinator that's putting an effort, and then evaluate from there. I personally, after seeing what Mac did his rookie year, I'm really optimistic for what he can do this year, and I think he can crack being sort of a top 12 quarterback statistically. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. He was showing that sort of trajectory as a rookie, and it wouldn't surprise me. You got that upper echelon of quarterbacks, and I think Mac Jones can fall, one or two tiers behind that when it's all said and done. So he will be a Patriot this upcoming season. I'm not expecting to see Mac Jones in a freaking Commanders uniform or a Buccaneers. Get out of here with that. The fact that all these people are coming out and saying, no, Mike Florio. Yeah, Dad. The fact that all these people are coming out and saying Mike Florio is basically wrong. That's just about par for the course. So, that's about right. We can move on from there. All right. A weapon that has been sort of linked to the Patriots and talked about a little bit, DeAndre Hopkins. This I thought was interesting, Pat. DeAndre Hopkins reportedly could be released. So they've been looking at potential trades for Hopkins and I guess not finding anything worth doing because these teams don't want to pick up his contract. And so ultimately, the Cardinals, who are headed into, it seems, full speed ahead tank mode, don't really see a need to have Hopkins on their roster. Look, if my analysis of contracts is correct, releasing Hopkins, they will still have to pay him, they'd have $22 million on their dead cap, which compared to paying $30 million for him sounds like you would just keep him, right? But if they are truly going against competing this year, like they are just fully tanking, then yeah, I guess save $8 million and be worse. But Pat, what do you expect this to turn into? I've seen a lot of teams speculated to be linked to Hopkins. You got the Chiefs, you've got the Patriots, you got even the Bills. What do you think ends up happening in the Hopkins saga?
Well, you see, the thing is, like you said, when you get this dead cap hit, and this guy is going to be dirt cheap this year, and he's probably, if he does get released, he's going to do what OBJ did and do a 1 year prove it kind of deal. And that basically opens the door for every single team in the league. Patriots have been the talk all year, but I don't know how well him and Bill O'Brien vibe. That's the only reason why I would probably say that's not going to happen. Kansas City would be scary, honestly, because, Mahomes hasn't quite had a receiver like him, but he doesn't need one. He's got his security blanket and Kelsey, and he likes the deep threats, but you give Mahomes a guy like Hopkins, granted, we haven't seen him play at a super high level the last couple of years in Arizona, but I just think that if that cheap, you could look at any team in the league. Where are you vibing here for Hopkins?
Yeah, I'm kind of going towards you on the Patriots thing, as much as it did seem like a nice fit for a while. And look, maybe he does just respect Belichick and wants to play for him. We know that, or at least we've seen that their relationship seems to be pretty good. But him and Bill O'Brien may not be the case. We don't really know where that stands because this happened so long ago. But I feel like the Chiefs are just such an obvious spot for him. It's like it's hard to say they need receivers because we've seen what Patrick Mahomes can do with literally anybody out there as long as he has Travis Kelce. But I feel like they don't want to go into next season, if they can help it, with Kadarius Toney as their obvious number one. This guy is he's on IR constantly. Like, he's a exciting young player. I hope he can put together a fully healthy year because I think he will be very explosive and productive. But Hopkins is a guy. I say this about IR as if Hopkins hasn't been hurt too. But look, get more of those guys to compensate for. Hopefully they just fall on different weeks and months where they're hurt. Hopkins is a guy just to add a veteran to that receiving room and make the Chiefs that much more terrifying. If the rest of the league is going to be so angry if the Chiefs come out of this offseason with DeAndre Hopkins for cheap too. They're going to be like, how do you guys, screw you guys. Like,
and I'm a big believer that Sky Moore's stock is skyrocketing.
Yeah, I agree.
No pun intended, but I'm a big Sky Moore guy for this upcoming year. So, they probably don't need Hopkins. I bet they can make it work with those two and Kelce. But I think that's just the natural fit. But I could see teams like the Cowboys, the Rams, teams that have always kind of gone for a surplus of receivers dip back into this.
Yeah, I could see that happening for sure. So it'll be interesting to see where Hopkins ultimately ends up. If he does get released, to me, it seems odd that a team wouldn't at least make some kind of late round trade at the very least for a draft pick just to get the edge. Like a team like the Patriots, why wouldn't you send a sixth round pick or something, fifth round pick for DeAndre Hopkins, just to make sure that he doesn't have the choice to go to a team like the Chiefs and screw you over. So we will see what happens with DeAndre Hopkins. But look, DeAndre Hopkins is currently an Arizona Cardinal, and the Cardinals are under some fire right now. Cardinals are being accused of cheating. Terry McDonough accusing owner Michael Bidwill of asking him to use a burner phone to contact their old GM, Steve Keim, while Keim was suspended. Also accusing Bidwill of, it's described as gross misconduct, including cheating, discrimination, and harassment in an arbitration claim filed Tuesday by Terry McDonough. So, Pat, this is just another bad look for the Cardinals. It's kind of been like this for the last year or two. Look, this is in addition to, you remember the Kyler contract language where he had to study for a certain amount of time, and then you've got them extending Cliff Kingsbury only to fire him. Pat, this is right. And Pat, this might sound like hyperbole, but are the Cardinals the most poorly run organization in the NFL right now? I know the Cleveland Browns exist in general, but right now.
They've at least got to be. I think that will always go to the Commanders, but the Cardinals have got to be up there as well. You look at also the funny thing that happened this year. Well, this isn't funny at all, but their offensive line coach Sean Kugler being fired basically for sexual harassment, and he claims this was mistaken identity. Well, who does he look exactly like? GM Steve Keim, who was on leave at the time. Not saying that's true, probably isn't, but just like everything it's more of just like a mind fuck. Like that could actually have happened. Just more dysfunction. And then even going back, they did Steve Wilkes so dirty. I mean, that team was terrible that year. Don't get me wrong. But, that's a guy who, again, showed in Carolina. He deserves to be a head coach. I really hope he gets another shot. That's a different story. But you just look at all this stuff and then all the debacles with Kyler, and it's just a mess in Arizona. And they have a good amount of, or at least in the last couple of years, they've had a lot of talent there.
Yeah, and they've underperformed to a great extent to the point where, I remember a few weeks back, we were talking on the podcast about who are going to be the worst teams in the NFL next year, and the Cardinals were almost unanimously going to be a bottom 3 team we projected. And so I think they're definitely trending that way with the Hopkins thing, and then now with these kind of, I guess everything's off the field when you're talking about, general manager issues and such, but like these things happening higher up that just are pure dysfunction. Just to give some perspective on what exactly the situation is and what McDonough is claiming. So he said that McDonough is a former Cardinals executive. He said that both he and former Cardinals head coach Steve Wilkes were left with no choice but to follow Bidwill's plan to use burner phones to communicate with Arizona GM Steve Keim while Keim was serving a 5-week suspension after pleading guilty to extreme DUI in Arizona. He then said that he was reprimanded for insubordination when he refused to do this, but he has the phones because he eventually did it. It's just, this kind of stuff doesn't come out if there's not something to it, usually. And it just speaks to a bad track record the Cardinals have had. It's a rough time to be a Cardinals fan right now. There's not a lot to really look forward to. It's like you look at teams, when you are firmly rebuilding and cleaning house and fixing things that are wrong, you have that kind of optimism, right? Like that's kind of where Chicago Bears fans are right now. That's where even Carolina Panthers fans are right now. It's like you can kind of see the vision. The Cardinals are not at that point yet. Like they need to get to the point where enough is enough, everything boils over and they say, all right, we need to blow this up, we need to rebuild, and we need to get the toxicity out of the upper management as well. So they need to head to that point before anything. But it's dark. It's dark right now for the Cardinals. It's not a great scene. So I don't know. Just unfortunate. I hate to see that for a team that, I was rooting for because they're a fun team. Like that's a team that you want to see kind of take that next step in the NFC and be a new face, new name as a contender, and it just hasn't transpired, and I think we're slowly starting to see more and more why that's happening. Another thing at the higher level of NFL management, John Elway is no longer with the Broncos. Contract expired. He said he wants more flexibility. He doesn't want to be directly involved on a day-to-day basis anymore, but he will be there for consultation if they want to reach out, but in general, not going to be as much in the weeds. Pat, I think this was probably a necessary move. Elway obviously won a Super Bowl as a GM in the Peyton days, but other than the Peyton days, it's kind of just been whiff after whiff as far as constructing this team, and I think it's nice to have a fresh start. He hasn't been the acting GM since 2020, but he's still been in a consulting role, and just things have not gotten better. So I think it's, as much as he's a legend, appreciated. Look, I'm in Denver. He is a GOAT here, and he's well appreciated by the team and everybody, but I think it was time.
Yeah, besides them falling into Peyton Manning, it's just baffling how such a great quarterback can be such a terrible judge of quarterbacks. Giving Brock Osweiler that huge deal, drafting Paxton Lynch, who I'd argue is the biggest first-round quarterback bust in the last 10 years.
Yeah, at least an underrated one for sure.
Because you think about it, there's been some guys in the top 10. I'd say Josh Rosen's the other guy just because he went so high. But in terms of actually being bad, like Paxton Lynch has to be the worst first-round pick in terms of just talent. And then you look at Joe Flacco and Case Keenum. It's just been a disaster. And, they conceivably have turned it around with Russell Wilson. Not so much last year, but we'll see if he can get back to what he used to be. So, yeah, this was completely necessary. I have always viewed this as more of just like a figurehead kind of deal anyway than him actually being crucial in making decisions, as we said.
Yeah, but either way, fresh slate for the Broncos, something that they desperately need all the way around. So we'll see if they can turn the Russell Wilson ship around at the very least. With Sean Payton, I am optimistic, but I also don't want to fall headfirst into believing too much in the Broncos again. I'm made that mistake once. I will not do it again. I'm also trying not to do it with the Jets, as I mentioned last week. Look, shiny new toys don't always equal success, as we've seen. There needs to be a level of organization as well to go along with it. All right, another interesting NFL headline that I saw, and this one, look, this probably won't transpire this year or next year or whenever, but the NFL is looking at expanding into a full Europe division. 4 new teams could be coming to the NFL here in the next 5-10 years, whatever it is. This is crazy. This is not out of nowhere, though. I mean, we've seen the NFL try and go overseas more and more the last few years. The Jaguars have basically become London's unofficial squad, despite the fact that, now the Jaguars are actually getting really good. So they probably the city of Jacksonville's probably like, no, give us back our team. But the fact that they are trying to build an entire division out there is just a lot more than I thought we'd get. Apparently, logistically, it makes more sense. I mean, you've got the teams that can play each other out there rather than just adding this London team to the AFC East or the NFC East. But wow, I mean, I can't even picture how adding 4 teams all at once would go. It just sounds like pure chaos.
I get it. The fact, these games they play in London and the games they've played in Berlin have been huge successes. There is clearly a market out there. But just logistically, like, can you imagine a team going from London to Seattle?
Yeah. Is it faster to go the other way around the globe at that point?
Honestly, you look at it, the closest team in the States to them would probably be the Bills, and that you're still looking at a 6-hour plane ride from London to Buffalo, most likely. It just can't work without extra bye weeks, and then that would just be a whole mess. But I'm sure they'd love to add another week too. But I think just kind of lean more into these games, go through add a few more games. Do a weekly game in London if you want, or in Europe like that. Like, why the hell not? But if they want to expand, which they will, just there are other markets that just make more sense logistically. Go to Mexico, put a team in Mexico City. That would be
Right.
more fun with more of an international appeal that just makes more sense.
No, it is a shocking just concept in general. I mean, I think trying to picture 36 total NFL teams, first of all, just sounds like you're getting to a few too many teams. I don't know. I can't even really fathom how that would work. It's like, obviously you have these methods for expansion, and over time the teams would get competitive, but just, I don't know. As a guy who loves the NFL draft and follows it so heavily, trying to picture these 4 new teams, being thrown in and getting top picks and stuff, it's wild. We're probably a few years away, but just something to put on the radar because, from reading opinions of NFL executives and such, they seem to think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of how much time it takes, which is crazy. So, guys, we could be headed for, maybe the London Silly Nannies expanding into the NFL.
Yeah.
And if we need new quarterbacks, Peter Griffin might be available. So who knows what overseas football will hold here in the next few years, but I'm excited. We talked about, maybe making a weekly London game or something to that effect, but these Thursday night football games are a bigger issue. I feel like I don't know what the NFL is thinking with potentially having flex scheduling for Thursday night football games. Pat, what was your reaction when you heard that this was even on the table?
I didn't like the London idea. I like this one even less. It's just because now we're talking about player safety. That's been the biggest thing for Thursday night football in general. Why players have been against it so hard is that you're expecting them to turn around from a Sunday game and change their whole weekly routine to to be ready for Thursday. So a team playing Sunday thinking, oh yeah, we got a whole and then they're like, LOL, joke's on you. You're playing Thursday. Like that just cannot work. It's easy when you're talking the same day or going from Sunday to Monday, but Thursday it just cannot work. You got to deal with that. If they truly believe player safety is the most important thing, which I don't believe they think that, but it is, and they cannot do this, and it seems like they're not. Which good, they cannot do this.
Yeah, so apparently they were 2 votes short of actually passing this. I guess the Panthers and the Broncos were, kind of big factors here, and if they change their mind, this is something that could, in theory, get approved at some point, but hopefully that just doesn't happen. Thursday night football, to me, needs to be just removed altogether. As much as I love having football in the middle of the week, and it is, a lot nicer than just 2 days a week being dedicated to it, it is so bad for the player's health, and I'm so tired of seeing it. Like, every player is like, it's just not enough rest. So regardless of, trying to flex this to have better matchups, I want Thursday Night Football gone altogether, and obviously that's not going to happen. We are trending literally the opposite direction, but that's just my thoughts on it. The one thing I will say is that the flex scheduling that they're proposing is not as crazy as you might think just by reading the headline. So it would be 15 days in advance you can change a Thursday Night Football matchup, and you can only do it from week 14 to week 17. So it's not like it would be happening all year. It's more so I think you get Thursday Night Football matchups for playoff-bound teams rather than being stuck with, Texans Broncos or Texans Colts Broncos, something like that on a Thursday Night Football game that just doesn't matter. I get it to that effect, but I'm firmly with John Mara from the Giants, who said, can we please think about the people trying to go to these games? Like, an NFL game is something that you plan weeks or months in advance, unless you're from the city that it's in. Even then, you probably still plan it a little bit in advance. You have the flexibility to, maybe do an impulse game, but in general, the fact that you can 15 days away from a game say, hey, we're putting it on Thursday instead of Sunday, like, that's in the middle of the week. Like, these people are planning for a weekend trip to go see a game. You need to keep the fans in mind. Like, that's just
implications for sure.
Yeah, like, it's just rude, quite frankly. Like, is it going to be a major hit to the pockets? Probably not for the NFL, but like, just for goodwill of the fans, don't do that.
It's the same way in the NBA, how fans get upset when, guys are load management. They're like, oh, they save up all this money for one game of the year, and Kawhi Leonard sitting out his 30th game of the year for no reason. It's the same deal where it's just like, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I just don't think the NFL is thinking about fans at all when it comes to this. Like, they think they are. They're like, oh, we'll give you a better matchup on Thursday. Like, guys, real football fans just want players to be safe and for us to know, like, to be able to plan things in advance if we're trying to go to these games. So it's just silly to me. It's the one thing they're handling so bad.
But it is for money. If this was not
it's
a
100%.
venture, then they would not do it. They can say that it benefits the fans, but it is money first and always.
100%. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss is actually non-football related. So big news coming out over the weekend. So I attended WrestleMania, as I mentioned. While I was there, news broke that the Endeavor Group is going to buy WWE as a whole and merge it with UFC to be one giant entertainment group. This was a shock to me. I want to give my thoughts on this because a lot of you guys know I'm a wrestling fan and just where I kind of stand with this. So the big problem with this to me is I don't follow UFC that much, but UFC fans are basically saying, look, ever since Endeavor bought this, everything's gone to shit. They bought WWE a couple days ago, and already there's been a gigantic shift in WWE. We've had one episode of Monday Night Raw since it's happened. WrestleMania in general was a really good show. Booked really well. Creatively enjoyed it a lot. Raw was god-awful, and come to find out it's because Vince McMahon is back in charge after being ousted about 8 months ago because of sexual harassment allegations. He's back because Endeavor doesn't care about any sort of PR look as far as the owner goes, because you got Vince, you got Dana White, exactly. It was kept in charge at UFC despite, many controversies that he's had, and it's just unfortunate. I personally am going to be, less invested in WWE for as long as Vince McMahon is in charge, and that's kind of the biggest takeaway from this change in overall ownership. Vince used to own it outright himself as a family. He's like, they're the ones that sold it to Endeavor, but they're saying basically, Vince, we want you as the face of it, and we're going to put you back in, power of sort of the creative side of things. Vince is an 80-year-old psychopath, out-of-touch moron who has no idea what fans want anymore and changes things on the fly. Nothing's cohesive. It's terrible. It's truly awful, and I am devastated by what has happened. I do not want to see what is coming in the next few weeks. That's why I have to literally remove emotional investment from this product for now, because it's just going to make me sad watching what happens. I need to see Vince go back out of power at some point, but here's the thing: he may just live forever, and entering dark.
I don't know much to add about that, but just that, not a fan of Vince McMahon, not a fan of Dana White.
No.
So it's never. Not only am I not interested in it from like a product standpoint, I don't even have much interest in paying attention to these people.
Yeah, no, and neither do I, and that's why Vince being off the radar for so long was awesome, and having Triple H kind of running the creative side of things. Wrestling's been really fun for the last 8 months. Even if storylines weren't great, they were at least consistent and cohesive, and things made sense. Under Vince, things change at the drop of a hat, and he just kind of hopes you forgot about it from the week before. So it's unfortunate. As a wrestling fan, very disappointing, but all we can hope for is that something changes here eventually, but that's where I'm at with that. All right, as always, we will end the show with our viewer questions, followed by a little live Q&A, but we've got some pre-recorded, pre-put-in viewer questions that I thought were interesting. First one: chances Rodgers to the Jets trade fails, and do you see the 49ers as trade partners? This from Sal Diaz 9. Look, we got to weasel Rodgers back into the podcast at some point, don't we? So it's, look, the longer it goes, the more questions are bound to pop up, right? I think ultimately he's going to end up a Jet. It just doesn't seem like the Jets even have a remote contingency plan. It doesn't seem like they're worried about things. It would be very Jets of them, though, to not have a contingency plan and for it to fall through. But ultimately, I do think he ends up being a Jet. And do I see the 49ers as serious trade partners? No. I mean, I know Rodgers has been linked to the Niners many times over the last few years as a California boy. It's a team that's built to win, obviously, but Rodgers is just not a guy that the 49ers need. They have so many options at quarterback, and I really think, as we've seen the past couple of years, any of them can work. Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, whoever's starting week one, they'll be fine. Even Sam Darnold is okay at the very least, and with those weapons, I think we'll be just fine. Although Christian McCaffrey probably wanted to gouge his own eyes out when he saw that dude walk back through the door. No, I think Rodgers will end up a Jet, and Niners will have a litany of options to choose from at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree completely. He'll be a Jet. I think it's just posturing at this point. The Jets, how cool the Jets are playing it, because they know they have all the leverage. What are the Packers going to do? Not trade him? and just have a disaster on their hands where
Right.
he's the backup. Well, he wouldn't even be the backup. He'd retire. But
Yeah.
I just don't see an instance where that happens. And the 49ers, sure, it's a fit, but I'm personally a huge believer in Trey Lance. I mean, we didn't get to see him do much of anything last year, and obviously we'll see how he bounces back from the injury, but I still think he's their guy for the future. So I would rather kind of stay invested in your future than go for a stopgap who is going to just be a distraction and all sorts of things. I don't think that's the 49er way at all.
No, I'm with you, and I think Trey Lance is somebody I'm really excited to see play. So many people are writing him off after he played a game and a half last year, and one of them was in a monsoon. So Trey Lance hopefully will get an opportunity here in the stead of Brock Purdy, who may not be ready to start the year. But it'll be a good quarterback battle nonetheless, and not one that will involve Aaron Rodgers. Next question, kind of random, but look, football related, and one that I thought was interesting to get both our perspectives on. Who is the greatest tight end of all time? This coming from Friskoff333. This has become a conversation because of the dominance that Travis Kelce has presented over the last few years. Pat, who are you at? Who do you think is the greatest tight end of all time?
I think it's Rob Gronkowski, which I'm assuming is going to be your answer as well. Just the fact that this guy was a nightmare for defenses. You know, he's too big for safeties. But somehow too quick for linebackers. And this guy just caught everything, and he could block too. You know, like you talk about some of these great tight ends all the time, Tony Gonzalez, Kellen Winslow. We're talking elite blockers as well. And obviously, I'm sure the system helps. You know, if Rob Gronkowski's not playing with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, maybe it's a different story. But the fact of the matter is, it happened, and he was the perfect weapon for him. Like I said, Gonzalez, Winslow, and Kelce are the only other guys I would really consider. That would be probably my Mount Rushmore. But give me Gronk right now.
I hate to do this, but I've been convinced over the last couple seasons to go the Travis Kelce route. I never thought I would. I think Gronk had an unrepeatable, unmistakable peak of production, but the longevity that Kelce's had, I can't deny it anymore. Like, when you talk about greatness, that has to be a factor, because otherwise you can just look at any guy's single season and consider them the greatest of all time if you really want to shrink it down. Gronk obviously had more than a single season of greatness, but I think Kelce is just getting to a point where most players, like, at least start to fall off by this age, and he just seems to be getting better and better year after year. He's somehow always goddamn open. It doesn't make any sense. He's like the Cooper Kupp of tight ends in that sense, where you look and you're like, how is there nobody on you? You're the only threat on the field. I don't understand. So it's funny when players are that good that you're just confused. So I think Travis Kelce, I can't really deny it, especially if he puts together another season or 2 or 3 like this. You know, you mentioned it with Gronk and Brady. It helps he has Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball, but still, he's doing a lot of the work himself as well. I think when it's all said and done, unless there, God forbid, knock on wood, a bad injury this year or something, Kelce's going to have the longevity that will put him on top. And, as a lifelong Gronkian, that does hurt to say, but it's just where I stand.
And like we talked about earlier, like, their wide receiver room is not impressive right now. It's Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but who cares? Like, they don't care because they've got Travis Kelce, which was basically the same thing with Gronk. It's like, who cares who we have around him? We have the weapon. We have the weapon right now. I think that probably when it's all said and done, yeah, you're probably right. It will be Travis Kelce, but I'll still go Gronk today.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your love of Gronk at the very least, because I got to put Kelce on top for now. But look, I think those are going to be 1-2 no matter how you slice it whenever you make your eventual overall tight end rankings when Kelce's career is done. Because dominance at the position that we haven't really seen. It's become so much more offensively oriented over the last 2 decades or so that, it's an obvious list at the very top at least. But guys, that will do it for this episode of Off the Bench. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for celebrating this UConn championship with us as well. I hope you guys were rooting along with us. Go Huskies.
We're the same shit as last week. Don't care.
Look, I assume you watched it, and honestly, if not, it's not like we could smell you through the screen, so we don't really care.
Good luck anyway, yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. But just kidding. That's kind of a false ending. Because we're doing a live Q&A, I just needed to give a point where we can, cut for YouTube and such. So, guys, for anybody who is actually watching this live, looks like we got about 5 of you in here. If you guys have questions, feel free to hit us. We'll stay on for as long as you guys have them. If you don't, we will actually end the broadcast. Truthfully, not going to be surprised, Pat, if we don't get too many questions in here, because we haven't, advertise this that much, and it requires.
Where are these people watching on YouTube?
We got a few different places. We got Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and as far as Twitch goes, I'm actually going to try to host the heavy Twitch channel with my own next time we do this, because my own Twitch channel has a decent following, and I want to make sure we have that in place for the draft show, because I think that'll be a lot of fun to get my folks in there, while we're doing it, and we'll actually get a bunch of engagement. Let's see, what messages do we have in here from just throughout the show? A couple people saying hi. Got UConn was so dominant, they deserve this. I can't disagree. I think it was the largest point differential for a full tournament run, because I know Nova was it was like 17 or something points a game, or maybe 18 points they won each game by, but UConn was at 20.6 coming into the final game and then won by 17. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure they got that. It was just incredibly dominant.
Team who won every game by 13 or more points. Obviously, that's a very specific number to do, but still impressive.
Still impressive. So you got somebody saying, Bran, your voice is fire. That message just came in. Thank you, CN Sports Edits. I appreciate that.
Very soothing.
I never thought I had a voice for radio or anything like that, but
we have the faces for radio.
We definitely have the faces for radio. I know that for a fact. That's why we only get a couple hundred views on the visual version of this podcast, but everybody wants to listen because they picture,
no one I talk to knows we have a YouTube. Oh, you're on YouTube? Yeah. Man.
You're on YouTube? Yeah. Well, look, I don't blame you guys. Let's see. What's up, Brand? Love the podcast. Been watching your skits since the 2021 draft. Love that. You sound just as good on podcast as you do on your skits. Thank you. I try editing a skit right now, actually. Little Mac Jones, Tom Brady, or Bill Belichick involvement with the trade rumors. There is a dad thrown in there, so we'll get that. The people will get to see the dad again. But yeah, guys, I think we will probably call it a day here. We might do the Q&A before the podcast next time. Here's the problem, right? Doing it before the podcast helps people tune in, right? It'll be like, okay, we can talk to you guys before the show. My problem is you're probably going to ask stuff that we plan to talk about on the podcast. So it's a weird little line to try and toe. But look, we're figuring it out. At the very least, you guys know you have the podcast to go back and listen to wherever and whenever you want. But this will be our actual sign off, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will see you guys next week. Adios.
Thanks for watching.